The slides, right? Irina, you're doing the slides, right? I hope she's doing.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We know that navigating fertility, challenging and very emotionally demanding experience. It can touch every part of your life, leaving very little space for your own care and compassion. That's why we're here today and this evening to take a moment for ourselves to reflect and learn how to be more gentle with our own hearts during this journey. My name is Irina MacArthur, and I'm Director of Patient Experience at Exception Fertility. And it's a truly privilege to welcome you to this session today. And it's my honor to introduce you to Ali Domar. She is Chief Compassionate Officer, Director of the Research Institute, and Associate Professor at Harvard Medical School. She's a pioneer in the field of mind and body medicine and has helped countless people find peace, perspective, and strength while walking this path of infertility. And tonight, she will be guiding us through the topic of self-compassion, infertility, and how to be kind to yourself during this journey. So feel free to drop all your comments and questions in the chat box. We will answer all the questions at the end of the session tonight. And we will leave enough time for us to talk about this. And without any further ado, I will pass the floor to Ali.
Thanks, Irina. Hi. Can you guys see me? Can you see me?
I can see you.
I don't see me, so that's actually a good thing. So I'm Ali Domar. I'm a psychologist, and I've been working in this field since before most of you were born. And before I start, there's going to be a couple exercises I'm going to lead you through where you're going to need a paper and pen. So I'm just going to give everybody a minute to run around your house or apartment and look for ideally 3 pieces of paper and a pen. Because this is going to be a lot of experiential in terms of self-compassion and fertility. So I'll just babble while you search for paper and pen. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So as Irina said, I'm not going to talk, or we're not going to do this for the whole hour. I really want to leave not only time for questions, but I really would love to hear things that have worked for you that you would like to share with everybody else in this webinar, so that, I've come up with ideas because I've been doing this for a long time, but I suspect you all have some great ideas on how to show self-compassion and fertility. And so if you could put them is it the chat box or the Q&A box, or I don't know the technology?
It is a Q&A box.
In the Q&A box. I just really want this to be a sharing experience. And probably starting in October, I think, we're going to make these webinars, or at least some of my webinars are going to actually be like mini support groups. And they'll be limited to the first 50 people who sign up. And it's going to be more of sharing experiences with me, making suggestions on how to cope better, how to have snappy comeback lines when people are mean to you, things like that. So I'm hoping everybody has paper and pencil or paper and pen. I don't want you to use your phone or your computer. It's really better to do these things freehand. There's actually research to show that a lot of the exercises that we teach actually are better when you use paper and pencil or paper and pen. So without further ado, Irina, can I have the first slide, please? So what is self-compassion? Oh, backwards. Hold on. Back. There we go. No, is that the second slide or the third slide? That's
Yes,
two.
the
Okay.
second.
So, as I said, I've been working with infertility patients for a long time, and my parents went through primary and secondary infertility. And so took them, I think, 7 years to have my sister and 5 years to have me. So I heard a lot about infertility growing up and how lonely my mom was. In those days, everybody was having 5 kids. And I do think that people going through infertility right now need self-compassion more than ever. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media. There's a huge amount of research has come out in the last 5 or 10 years showing that social media actually tends to make people feel more anxious and more depressed. And, infertility does a good job on its own doing that. And I think that people just need to take really good care of themselves. So, you know, I've said this before in previous webinars. If you haven't seen me, I think we have a library of my previous webinars. But the research shows the majority of individuals going through infertility report like psychiatric levels of anxiety and or depression. So if you're feeling distraught or out of control, it just means you're having an entirely normal reaction to infertility. I published a study, I don't know, 20 or 25 years ago that showed that women who had infertility had the same levels of anxiety and depression as did women with terminal illnesses like cancer, AIDS, or heart disease. And then we did a study in Boston in the first few months of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we surveyed, I think it was 3,000 patients who said that infertility was just as bad as the pandemic. And I don't know if you remember, the spring of 2020, it was very, very, very scary, but our patients said, infertility is just as bad. Next slide, please. So what is self-compassion? I've been studying this for a long time. I wrote a book about 20 years ago called Self-Nurture, because I think especially for women, it's really hard to take care of ourselves without feeling guilty. And a lot of us, especially those people who work in healthcare, teachers, things like that, spend a lot of time and energy taking care of other people and just feel really guilty taking care of themselves and meeting their own needs. And, I've been teaching this for a long time and I still sometimes struggle doing stuff for myself without feeling guilty. And I was with a friend a couple days ago and she said something about being lazy. Like, you are so not lazy. Sitting down and reading a book for an hour does not mean you're lazy. It means you're just taking care of yourself. But, 100 years ago, women had the opportunity to take care of each other because women, for the most part, didn't work. And so if someone was sick or someone had a death in the family, sort of women would swoop in and take care of each other. And we just don't see that anymore, mainly because, the majority of women in this country work. And so if you're a working woman, you just don't have as much time to take care of other people, let alone yourself. Next slide, please. So about, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago, my husband and I live in Boston. We were driving up to New Hampshire in October to look at the foliage because in New England, the foliage is amazing. And if you drive up Route 93 and you go past Concord, New Hampshire, you sort of go around a corner and all you see is the foliage. You see the White Mountains, which were, red and yellow and orange and just stunning. And as we went around the corner, my husband's like, "Oh my God, this is so beautiful." And that's it. You're just not meeting my needs. And he took a deep breath and said, "Okay, dear, what are your needs?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And so I think, if I, as a psychologist who teaches this stuff, was feeling this way, I'm going to guess that most people feel this way, that we run around, we live our lives, we're always busy, we're always nutty, feeling that our needs are not being met. And we often take that frustration out on our unwitting loved ones, my poor husband, but we don't really stop and think about what our needs are. So on one of those pieces of paper I made you get, what are your needs? So just jot them down. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Just write down what your needs are and really think about this. What are your needs? And, when you think about your needs, they could be needs from other people, they could be health needs, they could be nourishment needs, they could be more time needs, et cetera. So just jot them down. I really want you to think about what your needs are. other than getting pregnant and having a baby, which is an obvious one for every single person in this webinar. So let's go to the next slide, please, Arena. So once you figure out what your needs are, you need to think about who is capable of meeting your needs. And if you're in a relationship, I do a lot of couples counseling, and I think the biggest myth about love and relationships that if someone loves you, they can read your mind. And I can tell you this right now, there's no one in the world who can read your mind, and there's no one in the world who can meet all your needs. And so if you have this expectation that your partner can meet all your needs, that's a big problem because your partner can't meet all your needs. No matter how wonderful they may be, they cannot meet all your needs. So you need to figure out which of your needs is your partner capable of meeting? Which of your needs can your family meet? Which of your needs can your friends meet? Well, your community, your church or mosque or synagogue or whatever, which of your needs can your job, if you're working, meet? But I think the most important thing is which of your needs can you meet? What can you do to take better care of yourself? As I said, for women, it's this automatic ka-ching, I'm being selfish. You're not being selfish. We need to learn. I mean, honestly, I think sometimes guys are good role models, because they tend to, when a man needs to pee, he'll pee. When a woman needs to pee, she'll make sure no one else needs anything before she pees. So just think about it. Think about who can meet which needs and which of your needs can you meet yourself. Next slide, please. So I'd like you to think of yourself as a teapot. I know that sounds insane, but I'd like you to think about yourself as a teapot. And in order for you to be healthy, your teapot needs to be at least half full, okay? Every time you care for somebody else, you're pouring from your teapot, okay? Every time someone takes care of you or you take care of yourself, you fill your teapot, okay? So I want you to think about this. What fills your teapot and what empties your teapot? Next slide, please. So again, I'd like you to take your piece of paper and your pen that I warned you about, and I'd like you to list the people or events or circumstances or whatever that empty your teapot. What are you doing in terms of taking care of other people or things that empty your teapot? And once you've done that, I'd like you to list the people and activities or whatever that fill your teapot. So there'll be two lists. On the left, let's say, list the people and events that empty your teapot. And on the right, list the people and events or activities that fill your teapot. You're not going to hand this in, by the way. This is just for you. And I'm going to suspect that most of you are going to have a not much longer list on the left than the right. So on the left, you list the people and entities that empty your teapot. And on the right, you list the people and entities that fill your teapot. I'll give you like one more minute. Okay, Irina, can we have the next slide, please? So, and you can continue to fill out that list afterwards, but I want to make sure we get to all my slides and then we get a chance to talk to each other. So I'd like you to take another piece of paper, and if I was near my printer, I would show you what I want to do. Let me get a piece of paper. I can't find a piece of paper. Irina just said to me, everybody has paper around except clearly me. Okay, I found a piece of paper. So what I'd like you to do with the piece of paper that you just found is to draw a circle as large as the paper will hold. So actually mine, I don't know if you can see mine, but can you see mine, Irina? Nod yes or no. Yeah.
I cannot see
You
it
cannot.
because you're blurred.
I'm blurred. Okay, well, I drew a circle on the piece of paper as large as the paper would hold. Okay. So this circle is actually a pie, but it's not a cherry pie or a lemon meringue pie or a blueberry pie. It's actually a time pie. So if you would divide it into 24 equal slices, it would represent the 24 hours in your day. Now, obviously, it'd be really tough to cut up a pie into 24 slices, but this is again on your paper. So what I'd like you to do is just draw the circle and think of this as a time pie. Next slide, please. So what I'd like you to do is think, this is your average weekday, so Monday through Friday. Think about how many hours of sleep you get during the week. So if you sleep 8 hours, that's a third of your pie. And just take a third of your pie, make it a big slice, and write in sleep. Okay? If you sleep 6 hours a night, it's a quarter of your pie. If you sleep 4 hours a night, it's a sixth of your pie. My sister's a math teacher. I should be able to get this. If you sleep 12 hours a night, it's half your pie, et cetera, et cetera. But just figure out the slice of pie is how much sleep you get on average during the week. Next slide, please. So I also like you to think about if you work outside the home, ballpark how many hours per day you work. So if you work an 8-hour day, that's another third of your pie. If you work 12 hours a day, it's half your pie, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just draw I'm sorry you can't see this, but you also probably couldn't read my handwriting. So let's just say you work 8 hours a day and you sleep 8 hours a night. That will take up 2/3 of your pie. So 8 hours each, 8 hours, and you have 8 hours left. Okay. Hope this is making sense to you. If it's not, put something in the Q&A box and Irina will tell me to shape up. Next slide, please. So now I'd like you to think about everything else you do on a daily basis or almost a daily basis, because we're trying to figure out what are all the other slices in your life, because it needs to add up to 24 hours. So most people, if they work, they commute. Some people exercise, some people prepare meals, everybody eats. You probably end up going to the clinic a lot if you're getting treatment. You might spend time watching TV or on your computer. I should have added the phone, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'd like you to do now is figure out all the other slices in your pie. So as I said, if ballpark you're sleeping 8 hours a night, it's a third of your pie. If you're working 8 hours a day, that's another third of your pie. But what are all the other slices? Can you figure out how it adds up to 24 hours? And most people can't, because we waste a lot of time being anxious or worrying. But just see if you can figure out everything on your time pie. I'll give you another minute or so to figure it out. I actually was on national TV a number of years ago, and I was doing this with an anchor. And at the end, I looked at his time pie and I, on TV, said, "Oh, you didn't put sex." That was a really stupid thing to do, but we survived. Thirty more. This doesn't have to be perfect. I had a patient once who did this in a group, and she was so upset it didn't look good. She came back the following week. She did it on her computer, so it looked absolutely perfect, and everything was measured and everything else. That was a little much. But if you want to do that for yourself, go ahead. So when we get the next slide, please. So now I'd like you to take another piece of paper. Remember, I told you to have paper. And I want you to number it 1 through 20. So like you did in school, 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 20. So just quickly do that 1 through 20. There is a purpose to my madness, I promise you. So 1 through 20. And next slide, please, Irina. So as fast as you can, I want you to write down 20 things in your life that bring you joy as fast as you can. It can be people, it can be foods, it can be activities. I don't care what it is, just 20 things in your life that bring you joy. Go. Faster, faster, faster. Did you try doing this, Arena, while you were doing my slides for me?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I am. But I'm thinking, what if some, people cannot come up with a list of 20? What if it's just 19?
Well, that's when I say it can be different kinds of food, it can be different people, it can be sunsets, it could be beaches. There, I mean, I think I could probably come up with 20 foods that bring me joy. So, just
That's
starting with
fair.
chocolate and working all the way down to fresh fruit.
That's fair.
Fast as you can, 20 things that bring you joy. Faster, 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 faster. I often do this as a paired exercise. I was teaching a physician burnout prevention course last week on a cruise ship. And I did this with all the physicians in the training. And people really can laugh when they're doing this because it gets very funny if you're doing it with a partner. All right. I'm hoping you're close to 20. So why don't we go to the next slide? So now what I want you to do is go back at your, go and take the two pieces of paper together. So you're going to have your time pie and your list of 20. And I want you to check off on your list of 20 everything that appeared on your time pie. So if, I don't know, exercise appeared on your time pie and exercise brings you joy, you check that off on your list of 20. I want to know how many things. And I'd like you to, if you can't, put the number in the Q&A, because I'm very curious how many people, and if it's zero, that's really normal. It's sad, but normal. So if you had one or two or three or four or five, that's really, really normal. Are we getting some numbers in the chat in the Q&A arena?
We are only one,
Yep, normal.
4,
Good.
5,
Okay.
2, 3, 5. So the highest number is 5.
Five. Well, I've been doing this exercise for a long time, and in my experience, the average woman is usually between like 4 and 6, and the average man is between 10 and 12.
Oh,
So it sounds like,
8. 8
huh?
now. We have 8.
Ooh,
But
someone could actually run the webinar, huh?
surprisingly, we have, a lot of zeros too.
That's not surprising at all. Women have a really hard time. So, all right, so let's look at the next slide. So actually, let me go back. Sorry. No, back. There. So what do you think is the moral of the story here? The moral of the story is that in general, we just don't have enough joy in our lives. And I know it's really hard to think about experiencing joy when you're going through infertility, but there's still things that are good, like sunsets are still pretty, and a warm chocolate chip cookie might still be delicious. Or if you're a savory person, the crunch of potato chips. There are little things in our lives that can bring joy. And so what I'd like you to do after this webinar is over is to create another time pie and look at your list of 20 and think, how can you add more joy to your day-to-day life? And so, for example, I really like flowers. I love flowers that have a scent to them. And so when I used to work in an office on Mondays, I would go and buy myself like a lily or a narcissus or something and put it on my desk. And I would just enjoy the scent all week. And that probably cost me, $4 to get that flower. Or what I tell a lot of my patients who have to do injections is to go buy a box of really, really good chocolate. Like I call it Godiva therapy. And every time you need an injection, you get to have a piece of chocolate. Okay, a really good piece of chocolate, if you're a sweet person, can actually bring you joy. Next slide, please. So the problem is there's a question in my way. So infertility is really hard. I mean, as I said, I've been counseling patients for 37 years. And every week I say to somebody, okay, this is it. I've heard it all. There's nothing that can surprise me. And then something every week surprises me. So infertility is hard. As I said, it has the same impact as a potentially terminal illness. But you need to have a village to support you. And that doesn't mean You have to tell people you're going through infertility, but you do need to figure out what your needs are and to ask people to meet your needs. Um, when I talk to patients about self-nurturance, they often say to me, "Oh, I can't be selfish." Being selfish is meeting your own needs at the expense of other people. So if you one piece of leftover yummy chocolate cake and you know there's someone else in your household who wants to eat it and you eat it anyway, that's being selfish. Self-nurturance is cutting the piece of cake in half. And so each of you get your needs met. And it's really important, especially as you go through infertility, to start being more comfortable with meeting your own needs because there's no one who can do it all. You deserve to feel compassion for yourself. As I said, this is hard. I've been doing research like close to 40 years on the psychological impact of infertility, and it's hard. There's no question. Watch the depth of your teapot. Start to recognize how you feel, both physically and psychologically, when the teapot starts to go dry. And, our brain and our body send out all these warning signs. You might have insomnia, you might have headaches, you might be irritable, you might, start having cravings for junk food. Those are all the ways that your mind and your body are trying to tell you that your teapot's getting empty. And then, that's why I had you do the list at the beginning, because if you can write down things that you know will fill your teapot, if you're having a bad day, you can just look at that list. And as I said, I'd love for you to create a new time pie, one that has that can add as much joy to your life as you possibly can. Next slide, please. So as we said at the beginning, this is officially a Q&A time, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. But I'd also love it if you have found ways to meet your own needs or to show compassion for yourself or to self-nurture. I really wish you'd throw them into the Q&A box, and then Irina can read those to me and I can talk about how to use those strategies to your advantage. So do we have any questions yet, Irina?
Yes, we do. So our first question for you, Ali, do you recommend any psychiatrist? I'm suffering a lot with anxiety and lack of sleep.
So do I recommend psychiatrists? Well, I can't give names because then I would legally be liable. And I would say that, the reason someone would see a psychiatrist is if they want to take medication. And as a psychologist, my bias is tremendously towards, well, maybe it would be good to see a mental health professional and try non-pharmacological unless you are severely anxious or severely depressed, in which case you do need to see a psychiatrist. The best way to find a mental health professional who knows about infertility, and when you're going through infertility, you actually need to be seeing somebody who gets it, who knows what an IUI is, who knows about the side effects of medication, who know all the stuff about infertility. And the best way to do that is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. So it's ASRM.org. And they have what's called the Mental Health Professional Group. The last I heard, there were 703 members. And these are all mental health professionals who have an expertise in counseling. And there are psychiatrists and there are psychologists and there are social workers and there are master's level counselors. And it's by state. And so you can just find someone from your state. Now, if you want to see a psychologist, there's this thing called PsychPAC, where I think it's now 39 states. If a psychologist is licensed, let's say in Florida, they can actually see you remotely in 39 different states, which is great because it's been a huge issue for someone like me who lives in Massachusetts and practices in Massachusetts, where we don't belong to PsychPAC, and I can only see patients who are literally physically in Massachusetts. You can be from France, but if you're physically in Massachusetts, I can see you. So I would suggest if you decided you want to see a psychiatrist, to just go to asrm.org, go look for the mental health professional group and try to find somebody either in your state. And for a psychiatrist, I think they have to be in your state. Or if it's a psychologist, they can be in any one of those 39 states if you live in a PsychPAC state.
Thank you, Ali. Our next, not a question, but recommendation. Buy Yourself a Lilies. Apparently, is a very great book and
I'm sorry,
loving
buy yourself a what?
lilies, the flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I love flowers. Yeah.
so I think it's a great idea to treat yourself and buy yourself flowers occasionally, but I never read the book personally. I'm not sure if you heard the book,
I
but
didn't hear what's the book?
buy yourself lilies by
Never
you.
heard of it. Doesn't mean it's bad. I just haven't heard of it.
Neither do I, but I'll definitely
Maybe I need to
research.
read it.
Definitely research. Excellent. All right. It has helped me a lot to realize that sadness and happiness can coexist. I can be happy about other ways in my life is moving forward, but also be sad that I'm doing so while not being pregnant or having a baby.
Infertility can feel all-encompassing. And I think, I've said this in other webinars, is that it's a unique disease in that it impacts every area of your life. If you're in a relationship, it affects your relationship, it affects your sex life, it affects your relationship with your family, especially if your siblings are having babies. It affects your relationship with your friends, especially if they're having babies. It affects your job. No matter what you do, it's going to affect your job. It affects your financial security. Because even in Massachusetts, which has the best coverage in the nation, where supposedly 6 cycles of IVF are covered, a study came out a few years ago showing that even in my state, where 6 cycles of IVF are supposedly covered, only about a third of all people have actual full coverage because insurance companies are now, pulling little strings so they're self-insured, so they don't have to follow state mandates, or they have huge deductibles or huge self-pays or whatever. And so it will impact your financial security. And then it affects your self-esteem, it affects your body image, and it affects your relationship with God. Because, it may be the first time in your life, if you're a religious person, that God hasn't answered your prayers. And finally, and I think most egregiously, you know, infertility is a disease. As I said, the World Health Organization has stated that infertility is a disease. And yet I would say probably 99% of my patients have had at least one person say to them, just relax and you'll get pregnant. And would you ever say to a cancer patient, just relax and your cancer will go away? No, you would never say that to a cancer patient. But infertility patients are told that all the time. And it's just really irritating to me when, you know, 45% of cases of infertility are because there's something wrong with the reproductive tract of the female person, and 45% of cases are because of the issues with the reproductive tract of the male person, and about 10% tends to be unexplained. And I think that's getting better. When I first got into the field, half of all infertility was unexplained. And in fact, I think the biggest advances have actually been in recognizing the significance of male factor infertility. It's a disease, and people need to treat it like that. I could just go on a rant for 2 days about that.
For the next question, actually, I see there's a hand raised. I
Okay.
will allow to talk and I'll unmute. So please, Shantia, ask your question.
This is very exciting. We've never done this before.
You can unmute yourself, Shantia.
Oh,
Hi, Shantia. It's Allie. You have to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
I
You're unmuted
I
now.
apologize. I'm moving around and listening. I'm just getting in the house, so so
Okay.
I think I kind of accidentally, but I may have a question in a little while.
Okay. Well, come on
Excellent.
back. And I
Thank
think
you.
there's somebody else, niece. Arena, do you want to let niece in or whatever
Yes, I think I did.
oh, niece, I think you have to unmute yourself. And I think niece is gone.
Mm.
No, Chloe, this is kind of fun. This is way more fun than just me talking.
Chloe. Okay, here you are.
Hey,
Chloe. Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, Chloe, it's Allie.
thank you so much for taking the time to do this. If this is not applicable to enough people, don't shut it down, no problem. But I just did an embryo transfer, and I'd love your advice on, getting through my HCG levels are really low. They're like, it's relative, but they're like 14. And so one doctor who was subbing for my doctor today said, oh, we would just let's just stop your meds and get your period and move forward. And then I talked to my regular doctor's nurse, and she talked to the director of the program, and that doctor said, no, 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 let's retest on Saturday, like stay on your meds. It's been a roller coaster, which I know a lot of people are going through. Any advice for this that could apply to a lot of people? It's been a rough day.
It sounds like it's been an awful day, and I can't tell you how many patients I've played. The majority of my patients over my career have gotten contradictory advice from people, which is just
Yeah.
really frustrating. And I think it just goes to the fact that infertility treatment is an art.
Yeah.
So I can't give medical advice, but I would tell you that years and years ago, I had a patient who did an embryo transfer, and her initial HCG level was 11.
Yeah.
And her physician actually said to her, go home and have a cigar and a glass of scotch.
Chill.
And she called me and said, what should I do? And I'm like, well, I don't think you should be smoking a cigar or drinking scotch until you have a second HCG level. And I actually presented that case at Grand Rounds. And one of our fellows did research, and something like 10% of people who have low HCG levels end up having a healthy baby. And I can tell you this patient had a beautiful baby, and I really like the baby's name. So, you know, again, I'm not a physician, I'm a
Sure.
psychologist, but
Sure.
I would think that having a second level
Yeah,
drawn would be a very smart thing to do. I'm a
absolutely.
big believer, and again, I can't tell you what to do because I
Oh,
can't.
no, we're doing it. We're doing it. It
Okay.
was just, it's the emotional,
It's awful.
oh
It's
my God.
awful.
So how, and my husband is amazing. I feel so lucky to be doing this with him. This was our first transfer, and we have a couple more embryos that are viable and ready to go. But it's just, yeah, it
It's
was
awful.
brutal.
It is absolutely brutal. And, a lot of people, unfortunately, the majority of people who have very low betas do end up miscarrying. And most
Yeah.
of them tell me they wish they had never gotten pregnant.
Mm,
However, if you look at the data, because I'm a nerd, even having a chemical pregnancy or a miscarriage actually increases the chance that the next cycle is going to work.
got
I
it.
don't know why that is.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good sign. It means for anybody who has a positive beta, no matter how the pregnancy turns out, it means something was working.
Yeah.
That said, that first of all, the 2-week wait or the 9 or 11-day wait, I know that Arena and I don't know if you're a Prelude patient, but Arena and I, mostly Arena, created a handbook for the Prelude patients.
Mm,
There's given, I think, out at their embryo transfer and how to survive the 2-week wait, which,
mm,
was, as I said, some of my content and mostly Arena's genius. Um, would I tell my patients who are trying to survive the week wait or who are, waiting for the second beta, which is a really important beta, or someone who's, for example, had a history of pregnancy loss and is waiting to have their first ultrasound,
mhm,
um, don't think of it as waiting 2 days. Think of
mm.
it as how can I get through the next hour? And you
Okay.
get through that hour, and then you go through the next hour, et cetera, et cetera. A good thing also before you start a cycle, which is too late for you, is to actually write down things that distract you.
Oh, I have that. I did that. Great, great, great. I'll
Oh,
use it.
good, good, good. So you're doing well.
Okay.
Um, just don't think of it as getting through 48 hours. Think of it as how can I get through the next hour? How can I get through the morning? And just come up with everything you can think of to be kind to yourself. And if it means sitting down with a quart of Haagen-Dazs, that's okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I really hope you get good news in 2 days.
Thank you.
Ali, I'll read a couple of questions. We have few hands up and a lot of questions coming in. So
Okay.
I'll actually, rotate between the hands and the questions in a Q&A box. I constantly hear about having a positive mindset during the process, but after months or even years at times of failed attempts, how do you recommend staying positive while guarding ourselves or being realistic?
Okay, so I think anyone that tells you to be positive as you're going through infertility has never been through infertility because it's a roller coaster, as we were just hearing. It is a roller coaster. There's no data that I know of, and not to flatter myself, but I probably know more about stress and infertility than anyone else in the country. I don't know about any data that actually links a positive attitude to outcome. Because if you're 22 years old and you have blocked tubes, you know, you're going to most likely get pregnant on your first cycle no matter what, whether you're positive or negative or anything. You know, I'm actually doing research right now looking at whether or not physiological stress, so manifestations of, you know, heart and central nervous system, if we can predict who gets pregnant based on how your body is coping with the stress. But I've never seen anything on a positive attitude because everybody knows their prognosis. Your prognosis is going to affect how you feel. And so please do not force yourself or feel obligated to force yourself to be positive. It's really tough to be positive, especially if you're going through a treatment cycle. I think you need to sort of dig deep and think about what works for you. And if staying in bed for 2 days watching, you know, Mad Men is going to work for you, then stay in bed for 2 days and watch Mad Men. I actually just finished watching Lessons in Chemistry. I'd read the book years ago and I thought it was really good. And there's so much good TV these days. So I think, you know, don't force yourself to feel a way, any way that feels unnatural to you. But that said, I would also say that there are so many things that we know can help you feel better. And again, that's what I've been doing for my whole career. You know, I started a mind body program for infertility in 1987. And we know that, for example, that women who went through that program, because we've done randomized controlled trials, actually their depression and anxiety pretty much melts away and their chances of pregnancy double. So I would say if you're struggling, I would try to find a mental health professional, again, who knows this stuff, who can work with you and teach you things like cognitive behavior therapy and relaxation techniques and other coping strategies, because that'll empower you. Because when anyone goes through infertility, you just feel totally out of control of your mind and your body and everything around you. And it's really a good thing to learn strategies. I've done webinars specifically on mind-body strategies, and maybe Irina can put in the chat box how you can access my old webinars. Can they access my old webinars?
I can. We didn't put it yet on YouTube, so I can try to figure it out how we can put them all on
Okay.
YouTube,
Okay.
and we'll send a follow-up email with the link.
Okay. Because I've been doing webinars. I've been with Inception now for 3 years. I think I've been doing webinars for like 2.5 years. That should be a nice collection.
We do have a very beautiful collection of webinars, that is true.
My hair was shorter then.
All right, I'll unmute next patient, Ali. And Charlie, please.
Charlie or Chloe?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Charlie. Hey, Charlie, it's Allie. God, I feel like I'm on like a talk show. This is kind of fun.
It's like, oh, I'm next.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of like information, not a question as such. Or not even information, but just some nice thoughts. So I'm going through secondary infertility, had to do fertility treatment for my first son, my only son. And yeah, it really sucks just as much time as the first time. And it's okay to distance yourself from the triggers, and you're like, it's like, I found the first time I was going through it, I kind of tried to do the classic British thing of the stiff upper lip, just calm and carry on. And it broke me. It broke me so hard. And this time round, I've accepted that I don't have to put myself through such stress. And as hard as it is, your friends, if like, they will understand, like, and especially the true friends, they get it. Well, they don't get it if they've not gone through infertility, but yeah, it's okay to distance yourself. I've had to like take myself off.
You have to be self-protected, but I will tell you that there's actually a fair amount of research on the psychological impact of secondary infertility, which means that you already have a biological child, either through sex or through treatment. And the research actually shows that women with secondary infertility are at least as stressed as those, or miserable as those with primary infertility, if not worse. I think there are a lot of reasons. One is you can't escape the child world. Number two, you know your body can do it, and it's really frustrating that you can't do it again. And number three, people who have a child start to worry about the age difference. And so I've seen a cajillion secondary patients. And the problem is that most of the world of infertility support seems to be designed for primary patients. And so
Yeah.
I actually years ago ran a mind body group just for secondary infertility patients. And I learned a lot about secondary infertility.
And
It's really hard. And so I do you live in the US or the UK?
oh, I'm actually in Canada.
You're in Canada.
I'm
Oh, there's
originally from the UK.
so in Canada, it's called the Infertility Network, I think. It's sort of the equivalent of American Resolve. And I'm almost positive that they have a listing of mental health professionals. Or you can go the Canadian Fertility and Andrology Society, so it's CFAS. And I'm going to guess, but I don't know this, I'm going to guess that they also have a listing like ASRM does of mental health professionals. And it actually wouldn't even surprise me, although I've never looked, if the ASRM mental health listing also listed people in Canada. I mean, I know a fabulous therapist. I know a psychologist in Victoria. I know therapists in Montreal and Toronto. Canada has a lot of really good people that I know personally. And I think that if you really feel like it's going to break you, I think it might be nice to vent to somebody who really gets it. And I know
Yeah.
you guys are going to think that I'm pushing therapy, which I probably am.
Oh no, I do the same.
But I'm a therapist. What am I supposed to do? And it's just sometimes it's nice to just have someone listen to you who can confirm that what you're feeling is normal. And and again, I think the most important thing is to teach you skills that you can use to help yourself feel better and feel more in control. Do you think that
Yeah.
will help?
Oh yeah, exactly. But yeah, and I just again the self-compassion stuff. I for myself finding it's okay to kind of just distance yourself, and
Yep.
I've just
You
found
have
that
to.
really useful.
I
Yeah,
don't think you
exactly.
can survive infertility unless you can
No,
be
and it's
kind to
really good.
yourself and treat yourself.
Yeah, because I did IUI for my first son, so again, it's kind of it's trying to find my place in like the trying to conceive world, because it's like I
Mhm.
have a kid, but I didn't have IVF. I had IUI, which I know isn't. Yeah, so there's just lots of different factors, and I just never really feel like I fit in anywhere.
Oh, trust me, you fit in. The World Health
Oh yeah, yeah,
Organization now says that 1 in 6 individuals of reproductive age is going to have infertility. One in
yeah,
six. So if you
yeah.
look to your left and your right, wherever you go, there are people who are experiencing infertility.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm quite a big advocate for it and talk about it a lot because it was really lonely the first time round. So
Well, I'm just trying to get more celebrities to talk about it. So anyway, I hope this helps, Charlie.
yeah, no, it's been really helpful. Thank you so much.
I love the accent. I was in Scotland a couple of weeks ago and I just wanted to listen to people talk.
Oh my god, I get it a lot of times. Like people just stop me and just talk to me to hear me.
Well, I said this to someone recently that hearing someone with a British accent, in my mind, their IQ just went up 50 points.
Oh my goodness, I wish that was so true. But people think that I sound very well spoken. I'm like, gosh, you should hear me when I'm around people from the UK. I'm very common.
All right. Well, it's nice to quote unquote meet
Thank you.
you.
Thank you,
So,
Charlie.
Nina, do you have another question for me?
We do. We actually have a lot of questions that we need
Okay,
to
I'll
cover.
talk really
So-
fast. I'll talk really
Right.
fast.
So the next question is, how can I deal with the problem of comparing myself with people that have kids? I normally don't do it for anything else in life, but if someone has a kid, I feel very, jealous of.
You know what? I'd say that feeling jealous is an extraordinarily normal reaction in fertility. And if you weren't feeling jealous of other people, that would be abnormal. I can't tell you how many patients have said to me, I've never felt jealous in my life until I went through infertility. And that it just seems to be a part of infertility is you do start comparing yourself to other people, maybe for the first time. Women tend to have a really hard time when other people get pregnant and have kids. Men tend to, they tend to be more solving focused. And so if you're feeling jealous of people in your life, even people who you love, that's a normal reaction. And, the one thing I would say is I remember years ago, I was running a group and we had a Sunday session as part of the Mind Body group. And as part of that session, the hospital was like right on a river with beautiful, grassy banks with flowers and everything. And so I would take the whole group out to the river for a mindful walk. And this is with their partners if they had a partner. And so they could, they couldn't talk. They had to look, listen, feel, smell, etc. I wanted them to be mindful for half an hour. And of course, one group we got to the river, and we were walking along the river, and there was a couple there who had like a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and the wife was like 18 months pregnant. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the last thing I want my patients to see, blah, blah. So we came back to the hospital where we were running the group, and, people started talking about this couple. And one of my patients said, I just had the most extraordinary aha moment. When I saw this couple with the 2 kids and the pregnancy, she said, you know what? I realized I don't want those kids. I want my own kid. If you're comfortable wanting someone else's kid, maybe you could consider donor egg or donor sperm or donor embryo or adoption. But most people in treatment are in treatments, they can have their own genetic child, which means that yes, it's very hard when the people get pregnant, but you don't want their kid. And it worked. It worked for that group. I've used it with since then. Hopefully it'll work for you.
The next question, actually, I covered quite a bit in any other webinars that we've done. And for some patients who attended webinars with you in the past, this will not be a surprise. But the question is, how do you handle family and friends who is unsupportive?
Which is
and
the majority of family and friends.
And what boundaries do you recommend to have with those people around?
So for those of you here, this is a pet peeve of mine. I have actually, in my private practice, seen a number of mothers-in-law, and I basically yelled at them for 45 minutes about how they could be more supportive of their daughter-in-law and stop making snarky comments and being mean. I've seen some moms too. I think my favorite strategy is, well, first of all, in terms of boundaries, you have to be self-protective. And if you and your partner, if you have a partner, the two of you need to figure out what is okay for you and what is not okay for you. And so, for example, if you guys have siblings who have babies or are pregnant and you don't want to be around them, then you need to go on a cruise over Christmas, or you need to do something to be self-protective of yourself. And you can't go to baby showers, and you can't go to first birthday parties, and you can tell everybody you're under doctor's orders not to do that. But my favorite strategy actually is what I call snappy comeback lines. And so to do snappy comeback lines, you need to think of the things that people say to you that really bother you. And the reason I want you to memorize this is because I'm one of these people who just doesn't think on my feet. Like I was in a situation last week with a psychologist I work closely with, where someone said something really snarky to us. We were in a professional setting, and my colleague just snarked right back. Now, it would have taken me 3 days to come up with a snarky response. So what I'd like you to do is to think of things that people say to you that really bother you, and then memorize 3 kinds of answers. So the first answer is something that's polite. So if someone says to you, oh, when are you going to start a family? A polite answer would be, we're working on it. Or, one of my patients said, we want to wait and see how the dog turns out, or just something polite. Number 2 is to educate. So if someone says, when are you going to start a family? You might say, well, getting pregnant is harder for some people than others, or something like that. And then number 3, which is my favorite, is the zinger. So if you think someone is saying something to you in bad faith, like the situation last week, then zing them right back. If someone says something that doesn't feel appropriate, you could say, and why is it your business? Or why would you possibly think I should answer that question? Or something. I mean, it has to go with your personality. But I would suggest that you think of the things people say that bug you, come up with a polite answer, an educational answer, and a zinger. I really like the zingers. I can help anybody come up with zingers. I can be really snarky when I try. It just takes me 3 days.
Thank you, Ali. That's great advice. The next question is, and then I'll unmute the next person. What are some things to consider when you feel like it's getting close to time to end your fertility journey and consider other ways to start your family, particularly how to discuss this with your partner?
I'm a big believer in gut feelings. And I was actually just talking to a patient of mine this morning that I've been seeing for years. And I was the one that brought up the dreaded word donor egg with her, and she was actually okay with it. I think when you start trying, you get really excited. There's all this like, happy, spontaneous sex, etc. And then you go, you start trying to get pregnant and then you go through treatment. And when you start treatment, you tend to be really optimistic and like, okay, this is it, this is going to work. But as you continue through treatment, a lot of people lose that enthusiasm. And as opposed to starting a cycle with, optimism and hope, you approach it with dread. And that's when I think you need to turn inward and think about, are you ready to start talking to somebody about other ways of having a baby? Whether it's donor egg, donor sperm, surrogacy, donor embryo, adoption, child-free living. It's really hard to think of alternatives when you're still feeling really optimistic and hopeful. But as optimism and hope starts to fade, maybe that's the time to start trying these things on. And it's a very individual decision. And, I think the issue is if it's a female factor, and you sort of bring up the terms donor egg, a lot of male partners are pretty psyched about doing donor egg because they still then have a genetic connection to their baby. But if you do donor egg, if you have a male partner, they will have a genetic connection, but you will have a biological connection because you will carry that pregnancy. And there's this whole field called epigenetics where they actually have shown that the woman who's gestating the baby, her body can switch genes on and off in the baby. And it seems to almost work to make the baby more like their mom. So it's great news for people who want to do donor egg. But I think you got to trust your gut. And what I say to all my patients is if you do decide you want to pursue donor egg, the clock stops ticking. If you're 38 or 40 or 42 and you really want to take a year to think about whether or not you want to do donor egg, you can do that. Because, when you do donor egg, pregnancy rates depend on the age of the donor, not so much the age of the recipient.
Thank you, Ali. Anam, I will be unmuting you right now, so please unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi,
This is
Dr.
Allie.
Demar.
This is the talk show.
Hi, Dr. Demar. I actually read your book, Conquering Infertility, during my last IVF cycle, and it was extremely helpful.
Well, you could talk more about it because Prelude patients get it for free, I think, after their embryo transfer.
Oh, it was just sitting out in the waiting room, and I just picked it up, and I was like, "Can I borrow this?" They're like, "You can take it." I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
great."
yeah. Yeah,
So then I read it.
Prelude, the assumption is bought 10,000 copies to give out free to patients. And
Most of
Yeah.
the clinic has them in the waiting room.
they're in the waiting room?
Mhm.
Okay. And then apparently, supposedly, it's going to be made available nationwide to non-Prelude patients.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it was super helpful and helped me to, really work doing a lot of the breathing and relaxation techniques during the IVF cycle.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, but the thing I struggled with was kind of the emotional roller coaster of it all. I know we kind of touched on it, but we got like 9 eggs. Wonderful. I feel elated. And then I get 2 embryos and I have a gut punch because I'm like, oh, we're down to 2.
Yeah.
They both make it to blastocyst. I feel great. All right, this is great. We have hope. And then both were genetically abnormal. So another gut punch. So I'm like, my emotions are super, super high and super, super low.
Yep.
And I'm just like, by the end of that, like 2-week, time frame, my brain and my emotions are just kind of exhausted. And I'm just like, man, I don't even know how to feel right now. And I'm like, I'm going to therapy. I'm working on the things in your book, but that the roller coaster of it all, the super highs and the super lows, I'm like, any recommendations on how to manage all that?
Well, you can't take them away because unfortunately, an IVF cycle is a roller coaster. And I wish I could tell you that it's not, but it is. I mean, because again, people tend to start their first cycle with optimism, and if things are going well and they got 9 eggs, that sounds great. If you look at the data, unfortunately, there's this, even in healthy people, there's a huge drop off between the number of eggs you get, and then in a normal cycle, 75% of them will fertilize, but then maybe only a third of them will make it to day 5. And if you're doing PGT, depending on age of both partners, that you may or not have normal embryos. I actually had a patient years ago who her sister was donating eggs to her, and her sister had, I think, 3 kids. She was young. She had 3 kids, got pregnant the first month. So we know the sister was fertile. And so the sister, they got 33 eggs, which was just an extraordinary cycle. And they ended up with 3 embryos. And this is someone with known proven fertility. So there's a drop off for everybody. And I don't know if patients are as informed as they could be at the very beginning. But actually, I was just reviewing a paper that was submitted to a journal, and it was talking about how physicians should start counseling patients to not think of the first cycle they do as the be all and end all, but actually think about just doing a few cycles and freezing, hopefully normal blastocyst. And so you get a little collection, and then you have these really great cumulative pregnancy rates. And then each cycle doesn't feel as important. If you are preparing to do a cycle, there's a lot you can do sort of ahead of time. And, I would say that don't do a cycle if you have this massive work project due that month. Don't do a cycle if your 18 best friends are due to have a baby that month, etc. And on the converse, if you know, for example, you're going to do a September cycle, sit down now and think about, okay, how can I plan that month to be as compassionate to myself as possible? And that might mean, figuring out movies you want to see during that month, how you want to stock your freezer. I mean, just do a lot of prevention so that, by the time someone's trying to get pregnant, you have a really good idea of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And this is where this sort of self-compassion concept comes in, is you, and you say you have a fabulous partner, have a pretty good idea of what you need. And in fact, I got this idea from one of my patients years ago, where she and her husband wrote down 10 things that their partner could do for them when they were having a bad day. And I've been actually doing that with patients ever since. And I love that. So if you had a crappy day and you come home and say, I've had a crappy day, your partner can go, okay, I'm going to do number 7, because they know those are things that work for you. And that's, I think that one needs to prepare for an IVF cycle, knowing it could be hard, and figuring out ahead of time how you can make that cycle as easy on you as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Thank you so much.
But just because the first cycle didn't work does not mean the second cycle is not going to work. Every cycle is independent.
Yeah. And it's like mentally, I know all that, like I knew there's a high attrition rate. I knew it's 50-50 chance at my age. I knew I know all the stats and the numbers and all that, but living it was
Oh, it's
still
completely different. Oh yeah. You could be very intellectual going into it, but you still feel like you're being stabbed every time. I get that.
Yeah.
But again, being prepared in a very practical way and thinking about, I think that's one reason we want to start making these more of a support group, so that people can share ideas and suggestions for things that work for them. And I know it's 2 minutes past our end time, and I just realized that. So Irina is going to tell me I have to stop talking.
No, but I think, what we can do, there's a lot of unanswered questions in the chat box that, as I can see, I'll be able to share those questions with you. And
yeah, you know what? I will personally answer every one of those questions. If Irina, if you could email them to me. Now, the issue is I'm having knee surgery tomorrow morning. So I'm going to be high on pain meds probably for the next 5 days at least. So I probably won't, you don't want me answering those questions till the end of next week. But so it'll probably be a week before you get the answers from me, but I promise to personally answer every question.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Ali, for fantastic webinar, and we will continue do those webinars and sessions. The next session is in September. We usually conduct them once a month, and your clinics do have the calendars that is available with the QR codes for registrations. And I'm happy to email the copy of the next webinar as well to you all tomorrow. So please feel free to register and join us next month as well.
I wish you all the very, very best of luck. Please do not give up hope. I see miracles every single day.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye, everybody.